you will never watch this cartoon title sequence the same way again. Ed, Edd and Eddy was a beloved late 90s 2000s cartoon, personally one of my all-time favorites. At the end of the 2008 episode May I Have This Ed and Look Before You Ed, you will see this memorial dedicated to Paul Boyd. If you've ever seen it or happened to notice it at the time, you probably didn't give it much thought, but it comes with a devastating and tragic backstory. Paul Boyd was the man responsible for that famous title sequence, as well as working on animation for episodes of the show. Paul was born in California on September 30th, 1967, but grew up in Vancouver. At a very young age, he showed a great gift for the visual arts. He had a very successful career as an animator. He worked on Ed, Edd and Eddy, Mucha Lucha, The Mr. Hell Show, and Gary Larson's Tales from the Far Side. He even taught up-and-coming animators at the Vancouver Film School, all while dealing with his own personal struggles. In his 20s, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but did well managing it throughout his life. But on the evening of August 13th, 2007, sadly, everything would change. Paul was seen outside of his apartment acting erratic and strange despite having taken his medication. He was seen by witnesses shouting loudly and addressing strangers as friends. Witnesses at a nearby sushi restaurant called 911 after they recognized the signs of mental illness. Paul proceeded to yell at a man on a bench claiming that they knew each other. When the man made it perfectly clear that they did not know one another, Paul apologized and calmly sat down next to him on his backpack. All the shouting got the attention of someone in a 6th floor apartment window who looked down and saw Paul sitting on his backpack and believed it was another person. That person also called 911. Police were somehow notified that this was an assault with a potentially deadly weapon. 2 officers confronted Paul and one of them claimed that he struck them in the face with a heavy chain, calling it a near-fatal blow. That resulted in a 3rd officer showing up on the scene and shooting Paul in self-defense. Sadly, Paul Boyd did not survive this, but the investigation that followed revealed much more to this story. The 2010 investigation brought to light many errors that were made in the initial report from 2007. There were actually 4 officers on the scene, not just 3. That near-fatal attack was heavily exaggerated. The heavy chain that was claimed to be used by Paul was also just a bicycle chain with a lock on the end of it, and DNA testing proved that Paul had never even touched it. The only other chain-like item at the scene was a chain made out of paper clips. To make the situation even worse, the officers that first arrived were wearing civilian clothing and in an unmarked police car. Without reason, they immediately drew their guns on Paul, and one of them claimed that he had a hammer. Now, there was a hammer found at the scene, but they never found out whose it was, and witnesses said Paul had never had it in his hand. They ordered him to lie on the ground, and when they attempted to put handcuffs on him, that is when he struck one of the officers. Now, this is someone having mental issues being told by men holding guns, wearing normal clothes, and in a normal car. I can imagine he was rightfully freaked out during the whole situation. Now, when the next 2 officers arrived, Paul had a slight struggle with them and attempted to escape. That is when Constable Lee Chipperfield began shooting at him. A total of 9 shots were fired, with 8 of them striking Paul. Despite Paul being on the ground, crawling on his hands and knees completely unarmed, he took the final fatal shot. Chipperfield claimed he did not know Paul was unarmed when he took the final shot. Following the investigation, a 2012 statement was released by the police force saying that they had not used excessive force and the case was closed. That is until this video surfaced that was taken by a tourist during the incident. Police were not aware that this video existed. The video footage did spark another investigation, but sadly there is no happy ending to this story. Despite the video showing Paul was absolutely no threat to anyone at the time of the shooting, no charges were filed against anyone. The case was officially closed for good in 2013, and sadly no justice was served for Paul Boyd.